Hare Krishna. So today we come to the last part of this 3-part series on facing adversities when bad things happen to good people. So I'll do a quick recap before we move forward. So the journey we've been taking is in the first session I discussed about the purpose of philosophy. Philosophy is basically to help people make sense both at the level of emotion and reason. That means you just don't need to give an explanation, but we give an explanation that uplifts others. And then in the second session we discussed about broadly what do we focus in the philosophy, because philosophy is to make sense. So then we discussed specifically about causality. Causality means causation, which is the cause to focus on. So we discussed that any event that happening can have multiple causes. We discussed broadly 3 causes: God's will, free will, and evil. And understanding which factor is playing what role will help us to determine what to do. And in that connection we discussed the focus is not so much in why bad things happen to good people, but when bad things do happen to good people, what do good people do? So today we'll be focusing on the solution. So cause means we're discussing about cause of suffering. Happens not happiness, it's happening. So whatever happening is there in our life. So cause of distress. So I had written some poetic verses summarizing the previous sessions. Somehow it had got deleted. That's why I was typing them again when I started the class. So let me seek to be learning, not labeling. Philosophy is meant for helping, not judging. For all those who are in distress, let my words bring hope, not stress. Supreme always is your will. Protect me from evil. Guard and guide my free will. So my will is to do your will. This is a summary of yesterday and yesterday's class. That we want that our will becomes to do the Lord's will. My will is to do your will. In fact, that is a paraphrase of the last line of the Bhagavad Gita. Karishye vachanam tava. I will do your will. This is a simple definition of surrender. Surrender is that let my will become your will. So let's look at today how we move forward. In this particular verse, Bhishma Dev is telling Yudhishthira Maharaj, Tasmad idam daiva tantram, that this, whatever has happened, it's interesting and very significant, the specific word that Prabhupada uses. That all this is within the plan of the Lord. Prabhupada is not translating that all this is the plan of the Lord. There is something which is the plan, but there is something within the plan. Now what is the difference between something being the plan and something being within the plan? Tasmad idam daiva tantram. This is within the arrangement of the Lord. So what that means is that yesterday we discussed how, because we have free will, say if this is the Lord's will, now our free will can go in the same direction as God's will, it can go in a different direction, it can just go round and round, it can also go in the opposite direction. This is generally the way our free will can go. Now of course evil generally goes in the opposite direction. There is no confusion for evil. So there is a saying that the problem with the world is that the wise are doubtful and the foolish are confident. So people who are materialists or even hedonists are completely, you can say, pure devotees of materialism. Those people are completely convinced, if I just get this much money, or I get this much fame, or if I get this relationship and this enjoyment, I will be happy. So we as devotees have doubts, if I surrender to Krishna, will that actually lead to my welfare? Will Krishna protect me? Will Krishna guide me? So the problem is that the wise are doubtful. But the foolish, like we discussed the other day, there are people who are wise and there are people who are otherwise. So those who are otherwise, they are confident. The English word is for somebody who is totally confident, cocksure. They are completely confident without any doubts. So anyway, so what happens is our free will goes in many different directions. So we would like to align our free will with God's will. So when something happens, so when an event happens, whatever happens, if we consider, yesterday we discussed how God is the supreme controller, but that does not mean he's a sole controller. People have free will. So whatever happens, how do we see it? So everything is God's plan. That is one way of looking at it. Now if everything is God's plan, then do people have free will or they don't have free will? So the other way to understand is that, like Prabhupada says, everything is within God's plan. You could put it, there is, another way to put the same thing is, there is God's plan in everything. There is some plan of God in everything. What is the difference? That sometimes people may do bad things, and those God doesn't want them to do those bad things. They do it by misusing their free will. And we don't want to just talk about people. Sometimes we ourselves may do bad things because we make mistakes. We are fallible human beings, and sometimes we have anarthas where we knowingly do misdeeds at times. But it is not that any mistake or any misdeed can be ever so big that it can completely disrupt and devastate God's plan. God's plan is expert enough that it can work even through our mistakes. So to better understand this, that what it means is that if we consider GPS, say if we are driving a car and the GPS says turn right, and we turn left. Now what does GPS do? It reroutes and tells us, okay, go this way. Does the GPS say, you didn't obey me, get lost? No, it doesn't. Can any turn be so bad that GPS abandons us after that? Now, if you are in some remote areas where there's no internet coverage or that part is not mapped by GPS, it could be a problem. But GPS is also God's positioning system. So no wrong turn can take us out of that GPS. So everything is within God's plan means, like even if somebody has turned physically, if we consider, if they has turned left when GPS wanted them to turn right, GPS still has the capacity to reroute and get them back on the right track. Of course, every wrong turn will mean more time, more trouble, maybe more expense, more fuel. So there are costs of mistakes. Wrong turns are not something to be completely negligent about. It doesn't matter. Now, wrong turns are something to be concerned about, but at the same time we shouldn't be so terrified that if I make a wrong turn, I'll be doomed forever. So even if, say, we are driving along and some GPS is telling us go right, but somebody tells us, no, we should go left right now, and we follow them and we go left, then it is not our mistake, it is their mistake. We can say still it's our mistake that we listen to them, but still, we are not thrown out of the GPS. Like that, no wrong turn takes us out of it. So now for us, wrong turn means it could either be a mistake. Mistake is just sort of carelessness or inattention, or it could be a misdeed. Misdeed means something we have done because we have lower desires. We know what we are doing because of greed or envy or lust or anger. We do something. But either way, everything is within the plan of the Lord. So generally speaking, within the material vision, when things happen, there are only two ways we can look at it. Things are in my control or they are out of control. And if they are in my control, we feel confident. We won't become arrogant. Everything is going according to my plan. And they go out of control, then we become diffident. We even become devastated. Oh, what is happening? Everything is falling apart. But for us, so say, trying to have everything in control, thinking that everything is in my control is rajas. To think that everything is out of my control is tamas. So, but sattva and beyond then in bhakti is that things are in divine control. Now, I also have to play some part. And I also need to get a handle of how things are going. But this is the vision broadly of sattva, that there is a higher plan that is always working in my life. And so, how do we act in particular situations? That is a broad thing we'll be discussing today. So, the first thing that I'll talk about this, how do we do God's will? What does doing God's will mean? Is that God's will? Okay. Okay. Technology is evil. Not necessarily. So, we'll be discussing broadly how here Yudhishthira is being told by Bhishma, Anatha Natha Pahi Praja Prabhu. He says that this is within the Lord's plan. And then now, what do? You take up the responsibility of ruling. These people need you right now. The war has already happened. Now it is for you to take responsibility for alleviating the distress that has been caused by the war. So when we are in a particular situation, how do we find out what is the Lord's plan? So I'll talk about this in two broad terms. First is transcending and then is tackling. So transcending means first, whenever we are facing any situation, let us try to connect with the Lord. Mam anusmara yudhyacha. So transcending is mam anusmara. And tackling is yudhyacha. Is fight. So in life we have to face different situations. And we need to tackle those situations. First we transcend. Now what does transcend mean? Sometimes we use the word transcend to as if just completely neglect. And that is not the point of transcending. Transcending has basically a understanding within it that transcend means to go beyond. That's the literal meaning of transcend. So our vision goes beyond the situation. So generally speaking, what happens is, if we consider most of the times when we face a problem, so if you're facing a problem, if I am here, then what happens is, the world appears very big for us. And even if God is there, God appears very small. Yeah, God is there, but He is there enjoying on the altar. I am facing all this trouble in this world. Isn't it? Krishna is playing flute and dancing with the gopis. But here, this person is making me a slave. What am I going to do right now? So for us, God seems to be very small. And the world seems to be very big. But when we pray to Krishna, when we chant His holy names, when we immerse ourselves in bhakti, when the transcending basically means there is an immersion in bhakti. Immersion or absorption. So then what happens? The situation may be the same, but for us, the world becomes smaller and God becomes bigger. So this is something which is vital before we can face the problem. If we think that, oh, this problem is so big and where is God right now? Then we won't be able to face the problem with any kind of God consciousness. Now, of course, from a practical perspective, the problem may be very serious. So when I'm saying the world becomes smaller, doesn't mean we become irresponsible or negligent about the problem. But we understand that even this problem is within the plan of the Lord. That in that sense, God becomes bigger for us. And in general, when we do sadhana, the purpose of sadhana is not just to fill our attendance in some register or to meet a certain numerical count in our meditation. It is at least for a few moments every day during our sadhana. We need to bring our consciousness in the presence of Krishna and get that realization that Krishna is a bigger reality. That, yeah, this world is there, all its problems are there, all its temptations are there, but Krishna is the bigger reality. And when we get that realization, see, the world can have both. It can distract us in two broad ways. There is pleasure and there is trouble. So often we talk about how the world's pleasures are tucham. They are tiny. And we want to realize that so that we don't get allured by them. And that is true. And we focus on our sadhana for that purpose. That, if we chant strongly, then we won't be tempted by Maya. But it's not just, see, we may sometimes be tempted by Maya, but the nature of the world nowadays is that while we may sometimes tempted, we are more often threatened by Maya. Threatened means this problem is so big, or this person is doing like this has happened over there, that has happened over there. So there is so much insecurity in the world nowadays. And for most people, when they come to spirituality, it is not to protect themselves from temptation. Often that is our focus, and it is important. The two go together. The more we think the world's pleasure is big, the more the world's trouble will also become very big for us. They are two sides of the same coin. But when our focus becomes on telling people, give up the world's pleasure, why? Then what is the pleasure in my life? That's what they start thinking. Our focus should be that it's like trouble and pleasure. They are two sides of the same coin. And we need to understand what people's need is. So most people want relief from trouble. That's why when they do some meditation, they do some kirtan, they may not understand what is actually happening. They say, I feel good by this. But what is actually happening is they are coming in the presence of a bigger reality. A reality that is forever unchanging. And because of that, the problem doesn't appear so big. It starts, okay, it's not that big, I can deal with it. So this realizing that God is a bigger reality and we are a part of that God. Mamaivam sho jiva loke, jiva bhutaha sanatanaha. We are always parts of Krishna. Now we often use this philosophically to refute Mayavad, that we'll never become one with God. But it has much more psychological relevance for people today. Psychological relevance means we are always parts of God, means we are always parts of God's plan. That there is always some part for us in God's plan. We'll never be thrown out of God's plan. So when we understand God is bigger, it is not just God is bigger, but I am also a part of God. It's like, say, if there is a skyscraper building and I am a tiny person over here facing that, then that building can seem towering. But if I am in a helicopter that is going above that, then what happens? If I am airlifted above that, If I go way above that, then the building doesn't appear so big. So our Krishna consciousness is meant to elevate us above. So then the world's problems don't appear that big to us. So that's the first part of transcending. So Manusmara is about gaining that experience, that remembrance that Krishna is the bigger reality. So when we do that, that remembrance is for that realization. Remembrance of Krishna is for the realization that Krishna is bigger than the world, much, much bigger than the world, and then that I am a part of Krishna. That means I have a part in Krishna's plan. So, to some extent, when we get this conviction that yes, I have a part in Krishna's plan. I may not be able to see what is the plan right now, but I have a part in Krishna's plan. So transcending. When we do this, then after that, so first we turn our eyes toward the Lord, let the Lord come into through our eyes into our heart. Let the Lord get entrance into our heart, then He will entrance our heart. Entrance means enchant, captivate our heart. So then from that place of inner security, that Krishna is with me, I am with Krishna, then we can tackle the problems of the world. So what Bhishma will speak hereafter is that same Lord is here with you. Asyanubhav. Next verse he will say. And he will also say that he'll give his own example, saying that Tathapekanta bhakteshu pashya bhupanukampitam yanme syunstejata sakshat Krishno darshanam agataha. He says that just look at me. He says, because I was unflinching in my devotion to the Lord, therefore He has now come to me at the moment of my death. Now, we may say, how can a devotee say that I am a pure devotee? That's not a matter of humility. But he is saying that ekanta bhakta issue. I was one-pointed in my devotion. So he is not saying this to glorify that I am a pure devotee. He is saying that because I stuck with the Lord, I can see the Lord's plan now in my life. You know, when I had to fight against all of you, when I could do nothing, when Draupadi was being disrobed, when I couldn't help you, when all of you were being persecuted, you know, what was that? What was the plan of the Lord? No, I had faith in the plan of the Lord, right? But now I can see what is the plan. The Lord is with me, and He is going to be here when I am going to depart from the world. So He is not using Himself, He is talking about His one-pointed devotion, His steady devotion, to glorify the principle of devotion, not glorify Himself. But what does He say? Face the situation now. So that brings us to the second part, that is about tackling the problem. Mam anusmara. Then after that, yudhyacha. So how do we tackle the problem? Now broadly, tackling can be done in three broad ways. Often we think of tackling in Bhakti only as tolerating. Oh, it's a problem, tolerate it. And yes, tolerating is important. But it is not the only thing to do in Bhakti. There is also transforming. So tolerate, when we are tackling the situation. When we are tackling the situation, we could be just tolerating the situation, we could be transforming the situation, or we could be transferring ourselves from the situation. Okay, I don't want to be in this situation at all. And I'll just quickly give examples of each of these and we will elaborate afterwards. But we can see the Pandavas. Initially when Bhima was poisoned and he survived, Bhima was enraged. He said, I will teach this Duryodhana lesson. How dare he try to kill me like this? But Yudhishthir said, you know, let's not do anything right now. Let's not split the family apart. So maybe Duryodhana was feeling insecure. Maybe if we are nice with him, we will be alert, but we will not provoke right now. We don't know now will Bhishma support us or not. Dhritarashtra is unlikely to support us. So when Bhima was poisoned, the Pandavas tolerated it. Now, after that, if we consider they were again tried to be burned by the Pandavas in Varnavarth. So at that time what they did do, okay, this Duryodhana is too evil, he's too much against us, let's just get out of here. Now when they survived the fire, they could have gone back again to the kingdom. But they did not do that. So the fire at Varnavarth, they just went away from there. They became incognito. Why? Because at that time the thinking was that the first, a small poisoning, it's not a small thing, but still it could have been done by Bhima alone, by Duryodhana alone. But the entire scheme to have them sent over here, to have there as the housekeeper or butler or whoever, the person who was going to burn the house, to have a plan this elaborate, Duryodhana's father must also be in it. So they decided just going back there would mean just courting danger again. So they didn't know what was going to happen, but they decided, let's get out of here. I don't want to be mixed with this. They transferred themselves and they waited for the situation to become more favorable. They didn't know how it will. But then Arjuna won the hand of Draupadi. And then, now they were no longer just orphans. They had a mother, but because they had no father or protector, they're practically orphans. They're no longer orphans, practically speaking. Now they're the sons-in-law of a powerful king. And therefore, Drupada would have objected if the Pandavas had not been given their rights. So then, Dhritarashtra called him back. But again, Dhritarashtra tried to double deal. And I told them, go to the go to Khandava, which was a barren wilderness. It was unfair. It's like a father says, I want to be fair and I want to give, I have two companies, one company to each of my sons. But one company is flourishing, the other company is about to be bankrupt. And it's fair in name only, you know. To call such a division fair is an insult to the word fair. Isn't it? But the Pandavas again agreed, let's transfer, let's go there. But then what did they do? They transform Khandava into Indraprastha. And then finally, when Draupadi was dishonored and Krishna was dishonored, and Krishna came as a messenger, the Pandavas decided, enough is enough now. We have to fight a war. So, the Kurukshetra war, it's interesting, the Kurukshetra war was fought not just because Draupadi was dishonored. Draupadi had been dishonored terribly, that was 13 years ago. But once Krishna was dishonored, Pandavas decided that this person, he's not going to reform, so he has to be stopped. So these three are all approaches in Bhakti. We see Prabhupada also. For example, when Prabhupada was in India and he was trying to share Bhakti in India and working tirelessly, but it was not working, then Prabhupada transferred himself to America. He said, okay, enough, let's not worry too much about over here. But then when Prabhupada was in America, he was staying initially he was sponsored by Gopal and Sally Agarwal, and he was staying in their home, and they had meat, even beef, in the same fridge in which Prabhupada was keeping his bhoga. Now Sally Agarwal had some understanding. She said, Swamiji, we have only one fridge, we're sorry about this. And Prabhupada said, think nothing about it. Now, we may think, how can Prabhupada say that? Because for Prabhupada, he soon sized them up and he recognized that they are not interested in becoming devotees. So his focus was not on preaching to them. This was just a temporary residence for him so that he could reach to more interested people. So Prabhupada tolerated that. But imagine if any food like that would have been there, found in the fridge of ISKCON. Prabhupada would have got Narsimha Avesh, isn't it? So there is a time to tolerate. Now, if you consider later, when the Juhu land was being threatened, there are two similar situations. In Jhansi, Prabhupada had a property, and in Juhu, Prabhupada had a property. Both start from J also, isn't it? But in Jhansi, when there was a conflict, Prabhupada said, forget it. But in Juhu, Prabhupada said that if he wants to steal Krishna's land, he will have to go over my dead body. So Prabhupada fought. Prabhupada transformed the situation. So why this difference? Because in different places, Krishna can be best served in different ways. So now we can look at practical reasons. In Jhansi, Prabhupada felt that this is a small city, these people are more religious than, they're more pious than spiritually committed. So he said, this is not worth it. My Guru Maharaj said, we want to build temples in big cities first. So Prabhupada said it's not worth it. But when it was Juhu, it was India's financial capital. It was land which Prabhupada expected was going to become prime property as the city expanded. Prabhupada wanted a base in Juhu. So Prabhupada fought over there. So all these three are valid approaches. Sometimes when we focus too much on tolerating, bhakti means tolerating. No, it's not that simple. Yes, we all especially could do more by do better in life by tolerating more. As the world is becoming more and more westernized, what happens is, the whole idea is, if something doesn't work, change it. So there are times when there is a problem, sometimes we have to change ourselves so that we can grow and bear the problem. But sometimes we have to change the situation. Now, generally, the Eastern approach, whether it is India or China, it is change yourself, tolerate it. That has been the general emphasis. The Western approach is more change the situation. However, either approach can be taken too much towards the extreme. If change ourselves becomes too much, then there is passivity. We just don't do anything at all. We change ourselves to change the situation too much, then there is instability. So both extremes need to be avoided. And we can't reduce bhakti with only changing ourselves. Yes, of course we want to change ourselves. But we also, as a part of our service to the Lord, we want to change the world, at least change some corner of the world. So both are important parts of bhakti. So we could say tolerating is a part of change ourselves. And change the situation, that could be both transforming or transferring. Transforming means I'll stay in the situation and I'll fight the situation and change it. Or I may decide that this is not worth fighting, I don't want to get involved in this, so I'll transfer ourselves. The transfer can be just physically we go to a different place. Transfer can mean that we just change our department and do some other service. So any of these approaches are valid, provided first we have done transcending. If there is no transcending first, then what happens? So without transcending, all three will be problematic. Then tolerating will only lead to resenting. No, we are tolerating and each time we are filled with resentment. How much am I to tolerate? How much? And then we are tolerating and one day a volcano will explode. So if we are only tolerating, we cannot go on forever. So unless we are able to appreciate there is some bigger plan over here, there is some bigger purpose being served. No, tolerance doesn't mean just, oh, things are bad, let them stay bad. The idea of tolerating has two distinct aspects to it. Tolerating is keep small things small. so that we can keep big things big. So keep small things small so that we can keep big things big. So both of them are related. And when we keep the big things big, we can also keep small things small. Say we are doing a job and we don't like the work, we don't like the colleagues, we don't like the boss. But say we urgently need some money and the job pays well. Then you say, I'll tolerate this. Why? Because there is the big thing right now for me is the money that I want to. So if there is no big thing for us and we are only tolerating, that will be suffocating. Then we won't be able to function in our lives. So tolerating without understanding there is Krishna and Krishna has some plan over here. To stay connected with Krishna, to serve Krishna, I am tolerating. Then similarly, if we focus on transforming without first transcending, then we will become revengeful. Now, you did this to me, I am going to show you how powerful I am. I am going to punish you. So it will all become like getting back at the other person. So now it's interesting, like I mentioned yesterday also, that Krishna doesn't even mention before the Kurukshetra war any of the atrocities done by the Kauravas. Because Krishna did not want Arjuna to fight with a mood of revengefulness. The war was fought to bring dharma into the world. It was not to take badla. It was not to take revenge. And that's why Krishna says, it's nirvairaha sarvabhuteshu. He says, have no enmity towards anyone. He says in 1155. So transforming without first transcending will make us very revengeful. And that's not very helpful again. And transferring will become like running away. Oh, you know, this problem, this situation is difficult. I run away from the situation and I go to some other situation. That situation becomes difficult. I run away from there also. So when we are transferring, the point is not that we are so much running away from that situation, but we decide that in this situation, there is no way I can move toward Krishna. So we are moving away from that situation not just because that situation is difficult, but because that situation is making it almost impossible for us to serve Krishna. So Prabhupada went from India to America not because he was disgusted with India, not because he was frustrated with India. Prabhupada came back to India and he made his base in India and spent a large amount of time after 70s in India. Prabhupada went away not out of frustration, he was not running away from India. He was seeing that for him to share Krishna's message, initially at least, India was not the right place. So, first transcending and then tackling. Now, which would be the right situation among these three things? You know, is it transcending? Is it tolerating? Is it transferring? Sorry, is it transforming, tolerating, transcending? How do we decide in our particular situation? Now, for Yudhishthir, Bhishma is guiding him, and Krishna is also there. But it's significant that how the Bhagavatam depicts the situation. It is not said that when even Krishna is not able to persuade Yudhishthir, that is not seen as Yudhishthir's rebelliousness. You know, how whimsical. God is telling him and is not listening. You know, that is not the mood over there. Why? Because when something is to be done, especially something major, somebody has to commit their life to doing it. You know, if somebody tells us, you know, take charge of a temple that is not doing well, if we have a lot of ego, we think, I have become a temple president. But if we have a realistic intelligence, we may assess, you know, this is going to be a huge headache. It's going to be a huge challenge. Do I really want to take it? We have to commit ourselves to that. What is speak of temple president, temple? You know, even if one small department that is troublesome, even one person who is having some troubles, and we are told, okay, guide this person. Now, we may think, do I really want to take this? So, the thing is that for Yudhishthir to take up the responsibility of ruling the kingdom, And ruling the kingdom in this case did not mean it is ruling a flourishing kingdom. It is like, say, somebody is told, do you want to become the president of Ukraine now? Now Ukraine, after so much war, is utterly in shambles. And it's a huge challenge to rebuild the kingdom. The Pandava kingdom was not that bad, but it was. The war was devastating. So, for him, he had to be convinced himself. Yes, so it is not seen that if somebody is not ready, Yudhishthira is not ready to take a particular service, it is not seen as his defiance. Rather, the way the Bhagavatam takes it is that he needs to be persuaded. Now, it is of course Krishna's arrangement by which Krishna lets Bhishma become the instrument for persuading him. But the point is, when we have to take a particular course of action, if we get some instruction from a senior, from our spiritual master, some senior devotee, that's good. But eventually, we have to internalize that instruction. Just the instruction may not be a sufficient motivation for a long time when problems come. So, from instruction, generally instruction is outside in. And it's helpful. Most of us in our life situations, first of all, we may not get a clear instruction. We may not have access to our guru, we may not have access to senior devotees. Even if we have access, now our problems may be so complicated that they may not be able to guide. So instruction is important, but more important than the specific instruction to get in a particular situation is the broad principle. The principle is that what is the instruction doing? If the instruction is coming from our guru, we get an indication that it is God's will. Now, how do we know what is God's will for us if an instruction is not available? And even if an instruction is available, there has to be the internalization of that instruction. I need to become convinced that this is important, this is what I should be doing. And sometimes we may have to do the internalization without any specific instruction. Even for Srila Prabhupada, he had thousands of disciples, and there are only a few disciples who had regular association. And even them, it was not that Prabhupada necessarily gave some clear instructions when he departed from the world. Some of them he did, some of them he didn't. And sometimes life changes, situations change. So they may also have to adapt. So the purpose of seeking guidance from the spiritual master is not to outsource our decision making to the spiritual master. That's not the point. Rather, we hear from the guru, we learn from the guru, and then we learn ourselves how to make responsible decisions. So, I'll talk about three broad things, and then we'll conclude about how do we decide in difficult situations, how do we make decisions. So basically, first of all, there is introspection. Introspection is about, see this I'm not going to go detailed into this, but this three factors that I'm talking about, they are based on the 1840 Krishna talks about the 5 factors of action. Adhishthanam tatha karta karanam cha prathagvida vividhasya prathak cheshta daivam chaivatra panchamam. So the idea is, introspection is we understand our own karanam. Karanam is my senses. Senses refer to our capacity, our talents, our skills. See, when Krishna says the senses are a factor of action, he is not literally referring to the tongue or the hands. See, everybody has tongue, but everybody has a throat. But that doesn't mean everybody can take up the service of being a lead kirtanier. You know, it is biologically, if we analyzed a great singer's tongue or throat specifically, we might find the muscles might be a little stronger, but there's nothing special biologically. Krishna is talking about the skills. Do they have particular talents? So first we have to do introspection. Do I have the capacity to do this? Then after that is observation. Observation is where we look at the adhishthan. Adhishthan is we look at the situation, the place of action, as they say. The place of action can be the body, it can be the particular place of service. What is the situation? Is my capacity or is my skill set, is my talent suited to this particular situation? We have to do the observation. And by this observation, that's the second factor. Now, after that, there is, we do introspection, and then we do observation, then we do evaluation. Evaluation is like how much effort is this going to be required over here? Cheshta. Cheshta is endeavor. So then we decide whether this is what I can do. Okay, what is my capacity? What does this situation need? And how much effort is required over here? Can I put in that much effort? So I have maybe 15 other things to do, this is 16 things to do. Or am I going to give up all other things and do it? So the whole point of the Bhagavad Gita is not that, okay, to do God's will means just stop using our intelligence. If that had been Krishna's purpose, then Krishna could have finished the whole Gita in just 6 words. Krishna could have finished the Gita in, I am God, obey me, fight. Bhagavad Gita Sampurnam. So Krishna's purpose was not to give a decision to Arjuna. It was to give Arjuna the resources, the wisdom, the analytical framework by which he could make decisions himself. And we see that Arjuna doing that when Ashwatthama is to be punished. Krishna is with Arjuna, and yet Ashwatthama, Krishna doesn't tell Arjuna what to do. But Krishna decides. Arjuna decides, and Krishna is pleased with Arjuna's decision. So the point is that we need to look at our skills, we can look at the situation, look at how much endeavor is required, and based on that we make a decision. Now, will our decision be God's will in this way? Well, we can't know for sure. But God's will doesn't have to be like a one thin line. You have to do this, and if you're doing this, then it's God's will. God's will is more like a broad. It's not a thin line. It is like a broad expressway. We can be on different lanes. For example, I'll conclude with 2 points about this. The gopis, when they cook for Krishna in the spiritual world, when Radharani also cooks for Krishna, it is not that every day Krishna secretly sends a menu. I want this, 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 this. No, the gopis know what Krishna likes. The gopis have their own individuality. They feel inspired. Okay, today we'll cook this for Krishna. Today we'll cook this for Krishna. And Krishna is pleased by their individual expression of their service attitude. So God's will is a general direction. God wants us to come to Him. To come to Him. And the actions that bring us towards Him will please Him. So, once one devotee, Rochan Prabhu, asked Prabhupada, everybody has some service. So he was in London, and London at that time was the capital of Europe for our outreach. So devotees from Germany, from Portugal, from France, all these places they had come, and they're all giving reports of how the outreach is going. And Rochan Prabhu was there, and he said, Prabhupada, everyone has something to do for you. Please give me something to do. And Prabhupada said, what do you want to do? He said, no, whatever you tell me, I'll do, Prabhupada. I said, what do you want to do? No, he thought maybe Prabhupada is testing me. He says, whatever you want, I will do. Prabhupada said, understand our philosophy properly. He says, find out what you want to do and do it for Krishna. Find out what you want to do. That means, now this doesn't mean we defy our authorities and we reject our instructions. But the idea is, we look at our own inner inspiration. We look at our own talents. Yes, when our authorities give us some instruction, definitely we do that. But we should also be trying to come to a situation where even if nobody is there to give us any instruction, do this and don't do this, nobody is there to do follow-up with us, still we will be self-motivated to want to do something for Krishna. Not selfishly motivated, but self-motivated. That means there is nobody has to take follow-up. Did you do this? Did you do this? Did you do that? Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur took no follow-up from Prabhupada, isn't it? But Prabhupada was self-motivated. So, if we are given some specific instruction, we do that. But when we have to make major decisions in our life, we want to find out what do I want to do for Krishna? What are the gifts that Krishna has given us? What are the interests that we have? And then we move forward, and gradually we will move closer to Krishna in this way. So Yudhishthir was the best person for ruling the kingdom. He was not necessarily the best person for fighting a war. Arjuna and Bhima both were better. But Yudhishthir had a heart filled with compassion. He was devoted to dharma. So for rehabilitating all those who had been afflicted by the war, Yudhishthir was the best person. Thus Bhishma told him, Anatha Natha Pahi Praja Prabho. Those who have become orphans, those who have become protectionless, O Yudhishthir, please become their protector. So we all, in service to Krishna, can find out, what is it that I can take responsibility for. It could be this one person, I'll guide their spiritual life. It could be this one department. It could be this one service, whatever it is. And when we start doing that, that will be our offering to Krishna. And as we keep doing that, we will keep moving closer to Krishna. I'll summarize what I discussed today. Today's topic was broadly about that when bad things happen to good people, what do good people do? When we are facing difficulties, how do we know what to do in a particular situation? So I discussed broadly 3 points. First was that we discussed the relationship in God's plan and everything. So it is God's plan, we don't know, but it is within God's plan. That means there is God's plan in everything. So we discussed the example of GPS. Wrong turns are also within GPS. GPS doesn't want us to take the wrong turns, but even our wrong turns don't throw us out of the GPS. So what we need to do is that know that we are always a part of God's plan. So for that, we discussed about transcending. It is broadly to align with God's plan. There is transcending and then tackling. So transcending means basically for us, initially the world with its problems may be very big and God may be very small. But what will happen? If we practice bhakti diligently, then God will become the bigger reality and the world will become smaller. And then we'll be able to face that problem with greater perspective. So we need immersion in Krishna, by which we get that experience that Krishna is the bigger reality. That Krishna is bigger, Krishna has a bigger plan. Even if this problem is big, Krishna has a bigger plan even in this situation. And then after that we tackle the problem. Now tackling can be done in 3 different ways. It can mean tolerating the situation. If you're not transcending, then tolerating will become resenting. If we can be transforming the situation, we discussed the example of the Pandavas doing all these things, Prabhupada doing all these things. It can become revengefulness. We can become revengeful if it is not done properly. And then transferring can become running away. So our focus should be not so much on whether this situation is troublesome or not. The focus should be on how can I serve in this situation. And then lastly we discuss, okay, which of these should we do? So for that, we observe. We do inner introspection first. So understand our skills, our karanam. Then we observe outer situation, what is the adhisthana, and then we do evaluation. What is the effort required for us? And based on that, we will move in the broad direction of God's will. So God's will is actually more of a direction than a specific thin path. We find out what we feel inspired to do for Krishna, and then we do that. So this last part. There's your plan in everything. I can perceive this first by transcending. Toward you may I always be ascending, be it by tolerating, transferring or transforming. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Do we have any questions? Yes.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, thank you so much for this lecture. Prabhuji, we see in our daily lives that when we have when we get some idea, we pray to Krishna so that if it is His plan, we may implement it. And then we also hear that Krishna communicates to us through His devotees. And when we take this particular idea to the devotees, and devotees also give a green signal. And after some time, when we try to implement it, and if it fails and all our endeavors go in vain, then we question Krishna. And how to
see, the fact is that just because something is Krishna's plan doesn't necessarily mean it will be successful. See, Krishna himself went as a peace messenger and is not successful. So if Krishna personally executing his plan may not be successful, then what to speak of we trying to execute Krishna's plan? Whatever Prabhupada did was Krishna's plan. But were all of Prabhupada's plans successful? Even his biggest project, his two biggest projects, one was the Bhagavatam translation, and Prabhupada was so close in the 10th canto, and the biggest he fought was for Juhu. And at least 10th canto's large number of chapters were remaining. But Juhu temple, it was just 2-3 months away. Prabhupada departed in November, the Juhu temple was inaugurated in February, March. So basically, Prabhupada could have said, Krishna, just give me a few more months, I want to live. But when Prabhupada was asked in the final days, do you have any last desire? Prabhupada said, Kuch ichha nahi. So, just because something is Krishna's plan, does not mean it has to be successful. Or to put it in a slightly different way, that does not mean that we will be the person who will take it to success. So Krishna's plan may be like a relay race, and in that relay race, Krishna wants us to run and carry that torch from point A to point B. But maybe somebody else is meant to carry it across the finish line. Now, when the Ganga was to be brought to the earth, so many kings worked. They performed tapasya and they lived and died. But then Bhagirath was the person who took it across the finish line. Does that mean all the other previous kings were failures? No, their names may not be get glorified. So their names may not be glorified, but they are recognized by Krishna. They are glorious. So Krishna's plan can sometimes run across generations also. Once Prabhupada was told by one of his disciples, Prabhupada, Bhaktivinoda Thakur preached in Bengal. Bhaktivinoda Thakur preached all over India. You preached all over the world. Therefore, you are greater than all of them. Prabhupada became very grave. He said, never think like this. He says, a parent is pleased, most pleased when their child does something better than them. He said, it is by their blessings that I was able to do what I did. So, in life's relay race, different people may have to run different directions. And maybe one person goes across the finish line. So one person may get glory in the world's eyes, but everybody gets glory in God's eyes. So that's why even when you consider those factors, Daivam Chaivatra Panchamam. Daiva is the fifth factor. Even when Adhishtanam, Karanam and Cheshta are all there, still there is destiny, and sometimes things may not be successful. So I don't think we can use success as the sole criteria for deciding whether a plan is working or not. Because again, like I said, scripture is complex. Somebody said, Prabhupada said, Phalena Parichayate. So, but Prabhupada also said that, if you are selling diamonds and if you are selling imitation diamonds, far more people will come to buy imitation diamonds. So he said, actually, you cannot go by numbers. That's the point of that metaphor. So we cannot just take one statement and evaluate solely based on that.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Prabhuji, just one more. Prabhuji, how can we identify that what is Krishna trying to communicate to us in a particular situation?
How can we?
Identify what is Krishna trying to communicate to us in a particular situation.
Last part, communicate through?
What is Krishna?
No, communicate through what? I heard the first
in
part.
a particular situation.
Particular situation. You could speak that louder and faster. I don't think Krishna wants to microcontrol us. No, it is not that, like right now, if I speak one word, Krishna will be pleased. If I speak some other word, every moment I am making some vocabulary choices. So is it if I use the word difficult instead of hard, Krishna will be displeased, and if I use hard, Krishna will be pleased? No, see, and I travel across the world, I stay at devotees' homes, and many times, especially in the Western world, devotees are concerned about their children. They may go off track. Children often become headaches and heartaches for their parents. So then I ask sometimes when parents complain a lot about their children. So, I have studied Western culture and I understand what all temptations and challenges the Western children in the West face, even children in Westernized society face. Actually, many times parents say parenting in today's world is very difficult. But I would say being a child in today's world is 100 times more difficult. So many distractions. You say my child gets distracted. Well, the whole world is filled with distractions. So anyway, the point I was making is that, okay, is your concern that your child is not listening to you? And yes. Nowadays, the technology is very advanced. Would you want to replace your child with a perfectly obedient robot? No parent wants that. Some parents say, I don't mind having an additional robot, but I don't want that to replace my child. So similarly, Krishna doesn't want us to become like a robot. Krishna wants us to use our free will to serve him, to please him. So we don't have to be worrying constantly. Now there are of course broad parameters. If right now while speaking I start using some swear words or foul words, definitely there are boundaries. Like I said, so I said Krishna's will is not a thin line, but there are definitely boundaries in it. So rather than worrying too much, okay, is Krishna trying to teach? What is Krishna trying to teach me in this situation? Our focus should be on how can I serve Krishna best in this situation. And then in that context, we use our intelligence, but we are also open to Krishna giving us some signals from different places. And then we learn. There's one devotee who told me that, he said, I had given this class, how Bhakti is not about outsourcing our intelligence. That we have to use our intelligence. So he said that he was very depressed because of something, and he was actually thinking of ending his life. And then he said, okay, there is some traditional way of looking, of seeking guidance. So he said, he just took a book from his library, opened it randomly, and that opened to the page of Chota Haridas committing suicide. Hey, does Krishna really want me to do that? So he put that book away. He opened another book, and then it is said, Mahajano Yinagata Sapanta. As others have done in the past, you should do. Now, he said, does Krishna want me to commit suicide? So he said, I realized that this is not the way to find Krishna's will. Now, sometimes it can happen that we just open scripture and we find something that speaks to us. But that does not mean we give up our intelligence to evaluate. We have to. Krishna has not given us our intelligence so that we give up our intelligence. Krishna has given us intelligence so that we can give him that intelligence back through intelligent service. Okay?
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna, Pranam. Thank you so much, Prabhuji, for this lecture. Prabhuji, as you said that there are two terms like internalization and instruction. And instruction need not to be followed by internalization need not to be followed by instruction. If there is no instruction,
it may not always come through automatically. We have to go through the process of internalization, I'm saying. Say, sometimes we might get an instruction, but we may not feel convinced, should I be doing this? So then that doesn't have to be seen as a sign of rebelliousness. Like Dhruva, when Narad Muni told him, why are you taking this insult so seriously? Just go back home, you're a child. And if you think you're not a child, you're mature, then wise, evolved people don't take insults and honor, dishonor so seriously, then again go back home. So Dhruva said that what you're saying is true, but my heart is wounded right now, it just doesn't work for me. Please give me some instruction that works for me. So he's honest. And then when he told him, go and worship Vishnu and you will get your kingdom, desire for a kingdom. So there has to be some discussion, okay, you want me to do this? Why do you want me to do this? Now, sometimes the spiritual master may insist, do this. Some instruction may be very insistent. That depends. But my point is, even if we are given instruction and we have to follow it, we may have to deliberate, okay, how do I follow it? How can I follow it? When can I follow it? Prabhupada was given the instruction by his Guru Maharaj. You know English, preach in the Western world. Prabhupada decided that I am a grahastha right now. I can't go about preaching. If I do that, I have a young family, I have a small child, it will be unfair to them. So Prabhupada decided based on his intelligence that he would try to support the preaching by trying to earn a lot of money through his business. But Krishna had some other plan. So that internal deliberation, Vimrish Shaitad, is required.
But Prabhuji, how to recognize that this internalization is manifesting from heart or from mind? Maybe...
I don't think we can differentiate that. See, we can't, if we start bothering about what is coming from where, we'll get caught in paralysis by analysis. The things that come from inside don't come with a convenient label. This is from the mind speaking. This is the ego speaking. It doesn't come like that. So rather than worrying too much about where something is coming from, we focus on where something will take us. Okay, if I do this, is it going to take me closer to Krishna? Is it going to take me away from Krishna? So, for that we use our intelligence, for that we seek guidance from others. But looking at the external effect rather than the internal source is much more constructive.
Yeah. And Prabhuji, as you said that there are three ways to tackle situation: tolerate, transfer and transform. So in these three, in every situation, all three can be applied, or any two or any one. There is no like, we have to apply all threes.
Well, see, first of all, reality is complex. So when I was giving these three options, they are three broad options. But it's not, sometimes we may adopt one part of this, one part of that. See, in one sense, every situation that we have to go, we have to tolerate some things. Okay, I have this job or I have this service, and then I may have to tolerate this person because of that, or I may have to tolerate this thing difficult. So everywhere we have to tolerate something. Everywhere we shift something. Say for example, you are sitting right now. Maybe if you are feeling comfortable while sitting, okay. Maybe you decide, okay, I need a fan, we'll go and sit behind under a fan, that's fine. So the point is we maintain a service attitude, and these three are three broad ways for understanding how best we can serve Krishna. So can there be a situation where more than one of them are required? Possible.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you so much for this wonderful lecture. So, Prabhuji, you mentioned two things that we have to transcend as well as tackle situations. And you said that transcending has to come first, and then we need to like tackle things with the basis of transcending. However, in our own lives as sadhakas, we are dealing with these two things simultaneously. We are also trying to transcend, and at the same time we are trying to tackle. But like how can we do these two simultaneously effectively?
Well, it is not that we stop and each time think. There is certain training we have, certain reflexes that we have, and we do things accordingly. I was talking more in terms of big decisions in our life. When there is a major distress coming in our life, the context of our discussion is that Yudhishthir has to make a life-changing decision, or at least a life-shaping decision. Should I renounce the world or should I engage with the world? So these are major decisions, but it's in our normal course of action. We normally do whatever is appropriate in that situation, and maybe at the end of the day we do some introspection to figure out, okay, this was the time when I spoke like this, maybe I should not have spoken like this. We don't have to become half-hearted or hesitant in our day-to-day actions. So in general, for practical things, it is not that Arjuna, when he was each arrow that he was shooting while fighting was first transcending. No. There's no time for that. There is no evidence also that when Arjuna was fighting the war, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. War is a serious business. And he had to give his full attention to that time. So that Ma Manusmara was in the sense that his life was dedicated to the service of the Lord. He was fighting the war because that was his service to the Lord. And then Yuddhacha was practically happening. So it is not that remembrance has to be a conscious activity at every moment. Then definitely at some times we have to have conscious, even exclusive remembrance of the Lord. But in the course of our daily lives, it is that there is a broad awareness that I am doing this for the Lord's service. But then our focus has to be on what we are doing. Vishwanath Thakur used the example that if say a householder has a job which takes them far away from their homes, then they may do that job and okay, you have to deal with this customer or address this client's concerns or do this or do that. They're doing it all and they have to do it well. But at the back of their mind, it is there. I'm doing all this for my family. I'm doing all this so that I can provide better for my spouse, my children. So he says, similarly, a devotee may engage in the world, but at the back of the mind, a devotee is aware, I'm doing all this for Krishna's service. And that, what is at the back of the mind, no, it should be there at least at the back of the mind. It should not go out of the back door from the mind, isn't it? So for that, we need regular sadhana. We need regular association. If that is not there, then what is at the back of the mind will go out of the back door of the mind. Okay?
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you. Any last question? Yes, please. Any of the Matajis have any questions? Yes, please.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, Pranam. Prabhuji, my question is self-motivated and selflessly motivated, the difference I want to actually learn.
Okay. So what is the difference between self-motivated versus selfishly motivated? See, selfishly motivated means basically what is in it for me? What will I gain by it? You know, say that means, you know, I will do this service if I get honor, I get recognition. So when everybody may be more enthusiastic to do service like Pujari service, which brings on the eyes of everyone, or giving a class or leading kirtans. Somebody may not want to sweep the temple or do some other services which may not be visible in the world's eyes. So selfishly motivated is basically what is in it for me. I want something for myself from it. But self-motivated basically means that the motivation for that service does not wait for somebody to tell me what to do. That means if nobody is there telling me what to do, I will find out something to do for Krishna. So self-motivated is that we don't need to be told what to do. Like I'll give the example is, there is the 3 levels of disciple. They say third class is the third class is they don't follow the instruction. So if you consider, there is instruction and there is the intent behind the instruction. The third class doesn't understand the intent, doesn't follow the instruction. The second class devotee follows the instruction, doesn't really understand the intent. The first class devotee or first class follower follows the instruction but understands the intent much more and focuses on that. So for example, Prabhupada in the 1970s, he told his disciples that my Guru Maharaj wanted me to preach in the West, and I did that. I worked for my Guru Maharaj and preached in the West. Now I want to preach in India and you help me in that. Now when Prabhupada said I want to preach in India, Was Prabhupada rejecting his Guru Maharaj's instruction? No, he said, what is Guru Maharaj's intention? It was, okay, not just go to the West and give some classes and come back. He wanted to create a thriving community of devotees across the world. And Prabhupada had created devotees outside India, but Prabhupada felt that they will all need a foundation in India. They will need a place in India where rejuvenation will happen for them. In fact, one of the main purposes of Prabhupada in building big temples in India was so that they could become places for his Western devotees to come. So, the idea was that Prabhupada understood the intent behind his spiritual master's instruction, and he used his intelligence to see how that intent can be fulfilled. So, that is the meaning of the self-motivated means that, okay, this is what I was told to do, but why was I told to do this? If I understand that, then if some situation changes, then I can adapt and make sure that that intent is fulfilled also. Okay? So, Tamal Krishna, I'll give you an example. Tamal Krishna Maharaj was told to preach in China, and he did that to some extent. But then at one particular time, the Chinese government started clamping down completely. And especially China-America tensions were there, so he just couldn't go to China at all as an American. So then he decided that this is a service I want to do, but I can't do it. So then he started writing books which could be sent to China. Now Prabhupada's books were there, but Prabhupada's books were seen as directly religious books. They couldn't get the books in. So he wrote some books which seemed to be more non-sectarian, sent those books there. Then he got into academia. His plan was, one was, he gets academic degree, then with that academic degree he can go into China. So, but his academic outreach became a different outreach in itself. So my point is that if the intent is clear, then even sometimes some situations may mean the instruction just cannot be followed. But we can fulfill the intent. That's the point. Okay? So thank you very much. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki
Jai.
Bhishma Pitamaha ki
Jai.
Srila Prabhupada ki
Jai.
Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki
Jai.
Gaura Preman.
Hari Hari Bol.